You think of Ehud Olmert probably going to prison. What do you think? What can you tell us about Olmert? Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm Dan. That's Yossi. You'll figure that out soon enough. We are an American-Israeli or Israeli-American writing team. We've done 5 books together over a 24-year period. 25 years, actually. One of them came out in 1989, so that's a wow. And you're looking at 2 journalists, and you know that our job usually involves asking questions. And that's why we thought we would format it that way, in that I'll ask Yossi some questions, he'll ask me some questions, and later, to be very fair, we'll let the audience ask some questions. That'll be on index cards later. Obviously, we're guided by the news, Yossi, and I know you've been in the U.S. for a while and keeping up with things the way you can when you're traveling. Ehud Olmert, former prime minister. That was a headline today, even in the American media. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison for corruption, for taking bribes. So especially for someone like you, who's written about Israeli defense and security, etc., you think of Ehud Olmert probably going to prison. What do you think? What can you tell us about Olmert?
Well, it's a tragedy and a great pity, because Olmert was one of Israel's best prime ministers. He changed his colors, arising from the right-wing Likud party, and then moved to the center and became, in a way, peacenik. One of his greatest decisions was in 2007 to order the Israeli Air Force to destroy Syria's nuclear reactor. However, he was corrupt throughout his career.
Well, in some way, didn't you write recently that Olmert reminds you of Richard Nixon?
Yes, I did. Yeah, because Richard Nixon was, at least as foreign policy was involved, he was a great president. But he was a victim, and so is Ehud Olmert, of his own traits, personality, and characteristics.
In other words, despite what Richard Nixon said, he was a crook. But we're not here to discuss
Well, Olmert certainly, today at least, the court found him that he is a crook.
Now, Olmert also, Yossi mentioned the Syria decision. That is so important. And so in our book, we spend some time, as you know, Yossi, some American journalists call that a tick-tock, almost minute by minute, hour by hour, how the decisions were made. And I wonder if you feel that it showed Olmert, in a mature way, listening to his intelligence chiefs, and also realizing a very important thing about Israeli policy, which is that Israel's close to the U.S. Israel doesn't want to do things without a green light from the U.S., or at least a yellow kind of caution light, but not a red light. A red light from Washington can stop the Israelis. So then, in 2007, what did Israeli intelligence see in Syria?
Well, the process began with a failure, with a negligence, with an intelligence failure in the sense that both the Israeli intelligence community, the Mossad, the military intelligence, and the CIA did not know for at least 3 or 4 years that the North Koreans were building a nuclear reactor near the Euphrates River in the Syrian desert. And only in 2007, around April, 5 months before the decision to bomb the reactor, the Israeli intelligence had the conclusive evidence that indeed that structure, which was photographed by satellites, is a nuclear reactor aimed to produce plutonium for nuclear bombs. And then the Israeli intelligence and the Israeli security went to the political echelon, to Ehud Olmert, the defense minister, and recommended that the nuclear reactor would be knocked down, and that is doable, it's possible to do it, and the risk is worth taking. And before that, they consulted with the Americans. Basically,
literally, Olmert met with President George W. Bush, right?
Yes, and he asked him, well, they shared the intelligence, they shared the information, the intelligence communities and the leaders. And then Olmert asked him the inevitable question, what you guys, the Americans, are going to do about the nuclear reactor. Bush evaded the question, which was in a way a green light in the diplomatic jargon, that Israel can have free hands to do what they found necessary to do.
I suppose. As I recall, American officials told us privately that Bush thought maybe we should go to the UN. The U.S. was feeling it kind of had been burned enough in its worldwide reputation with Afghanistan and Iraq and just the U.S. image in general, and so the U.S. thought, no, we don't want to bomb Syria. But if the Israelis really want to do it, and I know in the discussion on the U.S. side, Vice President Dick Cheney thought it was a fine idea, even for the U.S. to do it. He thought that there could be a clear victory, and with all the frustration going on in Iraq and Afghanistan, in 2007, the U.S. could do something fairly easy for the Air Force. Syria. Today, a horrible situation, a civil war that's been going on for 3 years, 160,000 people estimated to be dead, millions of refugees. But what's the Israeli angle? I mean, I'm thinking about, at the beginning, I spoke with Israeli officials and they seemed kind of confused. At first it seemed with the Arab Spring and all that was going on in upheavals, that if Bashar al-Assad would be overthrown, that would be really cool. That would be good for Israel. He was an ally of Iran, so it would be a setback for Iran. He was a backer of Hezbollah, a very dangerous enemy of Israel. So it sounded great. But you were in Israel, always talking with Israeli officials. Did that view change as the civil war went on?
Well, at the beginning, as you said, Dan, it was, I would say, even a cynical attitude. Let them bleed.
Let Arabs kill each other.
Something like that, yeah. And that the civil war is weakening the Syrian regime, the Syrian armed forces, and basically the Syrian threat is being reduced. But later on, it backfired, because nowadays the Syrian army is making some inroads, is having some tactical successes in various fronts. However, along the Israeli border, it's a 100-kilometer strip in the Golan Heights, which Israel captured, occupied in '67. The rebels, and especially the radical Islamists and their militias, are having the upper hand. So in a way, the war is getting closer and closer to Israel. I can give you one example, a short one. A week ago, one of the Islamist militias took over a very strategic hill overlooking Israel at the border in the Golan Heights. And after capturing the hill and killing some Syrian soldiers and capturing ammunition and weapons.
The rebels, yes.
The rebels, the Islamists, they waved a huge banner on top of the hill thanking Osama bin Laden, who is their inspiration and guidance, and in a way a leader.
So that's within sight of the Israelis.
So the war is getting closer to Israel, and not only the war, but the elements that are very, very, very radical and hostile to Israel, elements that you can never be able to negotiate with.
Well, here's something intriguing, because at our website, our little plug for the blog, israelspy.com, we've written that on the border, and this got some publicity, Israeli hospitals have been treating some wounded Syrian civilians. Now, all I can say is that in the history of intelligence, of espionage, you take advantage of situations like that, openings in the border, chances to debrief people to find out what's going on in their towns, maybe even to send in some imposters at times. I don't know how far we can go with how much of this is confirmed, but in a hot situation, that's what the Mossad and Israeli military intelligence would do.
Yes, but it's also a humanitarian mission. It's not just manipulating the crisis for your own advantage by sending agents, recruiting informers, but also it's a genuine effort by Israel to show to the world that Israel is really caring about the civil war. Unfortunately, I think it's too late, too early. 2 years ago, I was interviewed on the Israeli radio, and I already suggested then, when the war was just at the beginning, that Israel should declare, since the world is silent, the Western powers are paralyzed. I suggested that Israel should take a decision to declare a no-fly zone in Syria, at least to neutralize the Syrian Air Force, which is a major tool inflicting the damage on the civilians.
We know how the Syrians are dropping those barrel bombs
Yes.
on citizens who have no defenses.
Yes, exactly. And I'm glad to realize that this week, the former chief of our military intelligence, General Amos Yadin, came up with the same idea.
What about Iran? It's a big issue, gigantic. It's the focus of our book from early on. Stopping Iran is chapter 1. It's been the main mission, I feel, for Israeli intelligence during the past decade. Prime Minister Sharon appointed an old friend of his, Meir Dagan, to be the head of the Mossad. And the Mossad, do you feel it really did change its priorities? I mean, it has to monitor, does do things all over the world, special missions, the Mossad. But Iran became, would you say, an obsession or a project number 1? What's it been for the past decade or so?
Well, Iran was top on the number 1 priority on the Israeli intelligence agenda. And that was brought forward by the head of the Mossad at that time until 2010, Meir Dagan. He strongly believed in covert operations.
Yeah, he thought if you get spies in there and do things, you can really slow down the Iranians.
Sabotage the program, even kill some scientists, just as a method to terrorize the others. He believed in covert action, and indeed, the Israeli operation jointly with the CIA slowed down the program for a couple of years, but it did not stop it. So in a way, it was a great achievement, but on the other hand, when you look at the end result of it, Iran is well advanced and is on the verge of becoming, Iran is already a nuclear power.
Really?
Yeah.
Big statement. People are going to go home saying that.
Within, yes.
Not threshold, not edge of.
Iran is a nuclear power. Iran can produce and assemble its first nuclear bomb in a matter of, I mean, there are various versions, but probably in a matter of 3 months, 4 months, maybe a year. Yeah. They have the capabilities, they have the know-how, they have the technologies.
But if there's an agreement, and the negotiations are resuming this week with Iran on one side and the US and the other P5+1 on the other. So it's resuming in Vienna. So if there's an agreement, you could criticize the deal, whatever its details might be. Is there anyone really in Israel who believes it would stop the Iranians, that it would hold the position in an acceptable way?
Yes, there are some Israelis who believe it. Israel is highly divided, or Israeli intelligence, security, and political echelons are divided on the subject, while Premier Benjamin Bibi Netanyahu is frightening the Israeli public, is comparing Iran to Nazi Germany, is making the resemblance of 1939 on the eve of the outbreak of the Second World War.
You probably all noticed Holocaust Remembrance Day last week, as usual. Great, heartfelt, terrific memorials. But Netanyahu made a point of again reminding that there is a danger like that now. Iran.
It's a year after year. When he addresses the public in all these memorial ceremonies, he immediately talks about Iran and the Holocaust. Like these are two twins, almost twins. But there are other people that don't think that he should do it. They think that Iran is a dangerous country, is posing many threats to Israel, but not necessarily a nuclear threat. Iran, I don't think there are any Israeli who seriously believe that once Iran has the bomb, and I'm not sure they will have the bomb, I don't think they really want to assemble the bomb. They want to have the capabilities to be a threshold country, to have the to be a nuclear threshold state, that they would use the bomb. it would be, I mean, it would be suicidal for them.
What I've thought in general, and when I speak to Americans who are concerned about Israel and what could happen in the Middle East, they see a suicidal, radical aspect of Shiite Islam as it dominates Iran. And they really wonder whether the supreme Ayatollah or some people close to him might one day, if they got the bomb, push the button to do that. And you said no serious people think so? I mean, how do you even live with that fear?
Well, that's the problem. As a leader, even as Mr. Netanyahu, the question is, can you, as a leader of a state, can you take the risk? Can you be sure and certain that once Iran has the bomb, they would not push the button?
Which is why it seems like there's an Israeli consensus, true or false, that Israel cannot let Iran get the bomb, because you cannot live under that question mark.
Yeah, but Iran already is on the verge of having the bomb.
Just a few weeks away.
So if you want, you can say that the Israeli campaign to stop Iran of having the bomb has failed.
Now, what U.S. officials say, however, that even the United States is adamant that Iran won't get a nuclear bomb, won't build a nuclear bomb, certainly that it won't be deliverable, that Iran won't be allowed to produce one that could be put on the head of a missile, etc. If U.S. intelligence found that out with its partners in the Mossad, that yes, President Obama would take action. He would bomb Iran's facilities. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, in part because I think these negotiations come to a situation where Obama has said, during his term at least, on my watch, Iran will not get the bomb. Now, he only has 3 years left. So I think Iran is going to satisfy him like that for 3 years.
Yeah.
In exchange, Iran will get sanctions eased, and their economy may get better.
Well, you see, I think that the negotiation, the decision by the Obama administration to rush into negotiations with Iran, the United States and the European allies, which is called the P5+1 group, they prematurely jumped into that negotiation.
Really? You think they should have strangled the Iranians a bit more with sanctions?
Iran was on the verge of being suffocated economically. That is the major reason why the supreme leader, who is the most important leader of Iran, this is the guy who is calling the shots. It's not the president, but it is Ali Khamenei, who succeeded the founder of Iran as an Islamic Republic, Khomeini. He realized that Ahmadinejad, the previous president, is a nuisance, is an obstacle. He is pushing Iran to the sidelines. And he decided, let's have a different president who would speak the language of the West, who would be softer, who would smile, who would present nicer face to the West.
We've had him here in New York, Rouhani, right?
Yeah.
Who spoke to Obama from his car. So they're putting a nicer face.
Yes, and had the US and its European allies decided, let's push further the Iranians, bring them on their knees, I think the results of the negotiations, which is now taking place, would be much, much better.
How about that? Palestinian talks. John Kerry's deadline was reached last week, April 29th. He gave it 9 months, and April 29th just passed. As a matter of fact, at that time, what was going on? The Palestinian Authority in Ramallah decided that it would work toward a unity agreement with Hamas, basically reach the framework of an agreement. The head of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, turned to the UN for international recognition. Even the US felt that was a violation. Meanwhile, the Israelis decided not to release a 4th round of Palestinian convicts, terrorists who'd been convicted of crimes, and Israel wasn't going to release them. I mean, it was falling apart. So where do we get? I mean, sure, we get, to me, some Americans, especially in Kerry's State Department, thought this could happen this year. The Obama White House didn't. I really felt that the president didn't think so, and he basically was telling his new Secretary of State last year, John, I love you. If you can do this, great. I don't think it's going to work. Go and try. And Kerry did work hard. Tell me about the Israeli point of view, including kind of the tachlis, the truth that even what intelligence analysts tell your government. Did they ever think there could be a deal with the Palestinians?
The intelligence community was very skeptical. They didn't believe that the Palestinian leadership, the Palestinian president Mahmoud Abbas, who succeeded Yasser Arafat, is made of the stuff that is determined enough to push forward for a real deal with Israel. On the other hand, the Israeli side, the Netanyahu government, was also very, very hesitant about a real deal with the Palestinians. So basically what we see, it's a tragedy that the two sides are stalling time, are not ready to take tough decisions. The leaders are not visionaries.
But is it also true that it's not a top priority, right? Earlier we spoke, and we also wrote about this in the book, when Iran became the top priority, that does mean that something else isn't. All right, I'm not saying Iran's the distraction, but now with the Arab Spring, with upheavals everywhere, with the Syrian civil war, I sometimes heard, especially from Netanyahu's ministers, the right-wing ministers who were reluctant for a deal, that one reason, ha'ezor boer, the region is burning. This isn't the time to make concessions. Whereas Kerry would come and say, the region's burning, you've got to make a deal.
Exactly. This is just an excuse for both sides, including the Israeli side, unfortunately my side, that they don't want to have a deal. And Israel believes, or the Israeli government, or the right-wing elements of the Israeli government believe that time is on our side. And the Palestinians are weak and incapable of turning into a third round of violence and uprising.
Right.
And because of that, the status quo is paying off.
The Israeli government's assessment, the majority of the cabinet feels that.
Yes, and I think it's wrong. Because eventually the status quo would play against Israel.
Well, the United States administration also disagrees with the official Israeli view. In other words, you have Kerry after the talks in leaked remarks saying Israel could even become an apartheid state in the future. In other words, that the trends are against Israel. Without a deal, without a Palestinian state set up alongside Israel, that you're not going to have a Jewish democratic state of Israel. So to me, that's a U.S. official, Senator Kerry, now Secretary Kerry, who really likes Israel. I believe he does. But sometimes there's a more cynical view, even among American Jews who follow all this and say, stop liking us so much, because you're sort of pushing us and telling us what to do. But, Obama and Kerry both feel that Israel would be in danger if there's not a peace deal.
Well, John Kerry said in a private meeting, which its content was leaked, that if there is no peace or agreement between the Israelis and Palestinians, Israel would turn into a second South Africa, would become an apartheid state. That's what he said. Then he regretted it and was forced to apologize. But I think that's what really he thinks that would happen.
Right, whether it has the A word or not, that's the fear. Some Israelis feel that things are going well, and you hear it from some government ministers. And you hear the Americans thinking, no, time is against a peaceful, democratic Israel. Got that. What's the intelligence assessment of the long-range Arab view? And I think about this because I think as Americans we often do, the acceptance of Israel. It's been quite stunning over the last 20 years or so, basically in the 20 years since the Oslo Accord of Rabin and Peres with Yasser Arafat. More Arab countries do business with Israel. Israel's more accepted. Certainly Israeli business, if I'm not mistaken, with India and Singapore and China is huge.
Yes, indeed. Following the 1994 Oslo Accords, the peace agreement with the Palestinians, the number of states which opened or renewed diplomatic ties with Israel went from 50 to 100. So Israel benefited from the peace process, even it was a problematic one. Trade was booming. Israel made inroads into countries like you mentioned, India, China, Asia. So the peace is benefiting all sides. It's always better to have peace than war. But even
so, what's the Israeli intelligence's, I didn't say that right, outlook for Israel's place? I mean, again, you know, American Jews who care about Israel especially sometimes worry, is the country doomed? Is it accepted? Will it be part of the Middle East?
Well, look, the Arab regimes, or at least most of them, have already accepted Israel as a fact in the ground, as a fact of life. Israel has full diplomatic relations with two Arab countries, Egypt and Jordan. They have secret ties with countries, sometimes based on the notion that the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Reported ties with Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates. We had good relations with Morocco. So in that sense, Israel is part of the Middle East.
And you think accepted. Well, let's stop at Egypt for a second, because the other day the Israeli ambassador to Egypt, a new fella, went to Cairo for 2 days. He didn't feel it was safer to stay any longer. The old embassy building is locked up, so it's not safe. But what does it remind us of? Egypt's had a total roller coaster, very important to the U.S. as well. Hosni Mubarak was an important ally in the region, so he was overthrown. Because of the Tahrir Square crowd and all those people outdoors, heroically so, and Googling each other and all that excitement. So Mubarak is overthrown. I see that strategically, at least, as a setback for the U.S. and Israel.
Absolutely.
Okay. Then in democratic elections, the Muslim Brotherhood under Mohammed Morsi is elected. So how did Israel take that overtly and covertly?
Well, you already said toppling Mubarak by a popular uprising, which actually was initiated by the liberal sector of Egypt, the youth, the people who wanted a real change, those who wanted to be open to the West, and not the Muslims, not the Muslim Brotherhood. But then the Muslim Brotherhood, in a way, I hijacked the
freedom
power,
movement,
manipulated the freedom movement and was voted into power. So Israel, on one hand, was very upset, very worried, but on the other hand, still they were, since even under the Muslim Brotherhood regime, it did not change the peace treaty with Israel. It kept it to the letter. And there was a secret cooperation between the two sides, and not only that, under the Muslim Brotherhood government of President Morsi, an Israeli soldier who was captured by Hamas, which is a Palestinian Islamist movement in Gaza, was released due to the pressure
that Morsi applied. So Morsi
Yes.
was trying to retain the treaty, retain ties with Washington. Maybe he needed the money. We don't know what the future would have been. You know, many skeptical analysts say he would have brought in full Sharia law and turned it into a radical anti-Western state.
Yes, at the end, yes.
Oh, okay, I hear you. So, did Israel celebrate quietly when Morsi was overthrown by
Yes.
General Sisi in the military?
When you
last
say Israel, yes, the establishment, the government, the intelligence community, yes, they are much more happy now when you have basically a military government.
But it's not just a feeling. Action is
No,
what
it's
counts.
actions.
Well, what does
Well,
Israel do with the Egyptians?
The difference between the Morsi approach and the General Sisi approach, the former defense minister, is very simple. Morsi was very reluctant to fight the Al-Qaeda type of groups which mushroomed in Sinai.
On the Sinai.
On the Sinai. This government is doing it with the tacit, or not even, sometimes not so tacit, understanding and cooperation with Israel. Israel is providing sometimes very accurate intelligence to the Egyptian military about those terrorists operating in Sinai.
Let's put a finer point on that.
Yeah.
Israel's working with Sisi.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So you may not like his human rights record, etc.,
Yes.
and oppressing the Muslim Brotherhood, Al Jazeera journalists, and I protest that too, that they're locked up, and other things. But strategically, in the big picture, those in Israel who make those decisions, they like to work with Sisi's government.
They like to work with governments, first of all.
Now, we spoke about espionage, and I mentioned that in the Syria context, even as there's a civil war, and as Yossi's reported, it's come closer and closer to the Golan Heights, that Israeli espionage, the Mossad, must be doing what it can to get more information, maybe plant agents, as I said. Let's think about Egypt. Okay, Egypt's very important. It's still the most important Arab country. And I think we see something dramatic. We wrote in our book about several occasions in which Israelis were planted in Cairo, living in Cairo, various disguises. One case was fairly famous. We think we added a lot of detail to Wolfgang Lotz, a German-born Israeli who then masqueraded as somebody else in Cairo. I'm not going to ask you to reveal what's going on now, even if you know, but I'm thinking of 1973, right? Because we had recently the 40th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, and of course we write about that as the worst mistake Israeli intelligence ever made, taken by surprise on Yom Kippur by Egypt and Syria, October of 1973. And yet we've given quite a lot of detail in the book about an agent that the Mossad had, an Egyptian, Ashraf Marwan, a member of Gamal Abdel Nasser's family, the former president's family, and he worked for Sadat. And he tried to warn...
He was married to the daughter of President Nasser.
The late President Nasser. So he tried to warn Israel, in the Mossad director, he suggested, let's meet in London October 5th, day before the war.
He was a cultivated agent working for Israel for 3 years, since 1970, all the way to 73, and even after that.
A well-placed
Yes, he was a confidant of President Sadat. He was in the inner circle of President Sadat, so he was privy to most of the secrets, including the military ones. And on the eve of the war, in October the 4th, he flew to Rome and then to London, and he met there with the director of the Israeli Mossad. At the time it was General Zamir, and provided him the very detailed, exact information that tomorrow, on Saturday, the war would break out.
So Tzvi Zamir, the head of the Mossad, has that information pretty early on Friday, October 5th. Next day there'll be an attack by the Egyptians. And it turns out the head of the Mossad has trouble convincing the leadership, Prime Minister Meir, and, as we illustrate in our book, another agency you hardly ever hear about, Agaf HaModi'in, known to Israelis as Aman. Agaf HaModi'in is the intelligence branch of the Israeli military. It's much bigger than the Mossad. And they had a chief, Eli Ze'era, who totally rejected that intelligence data.
Yes, Ze'era was arrogant. He believed that the Egyptians, he developed preconceived notion that the Egyptians are weak and they would never, and they are threatening, the wolf cry syndrome.
And the Arabs would never attack.
And they would never attack Israel. And therefore, he thought that this agent, Dr. Ashraf Marwan, is not genuine, is not telling the truth, or maybe is even a double agent.
There's so many stories to tell you, but we're going to develop that one just a little bit because it's really amazing. It's right out of the movies. So Marwan, right? He's working for the Mossad. He gives us important information in 73. The Israelis apparently don't listen, but as you indicated, Yossi, he goes on working for the Israelis, but years later, there are a couple of things to say, but we have to keep it in brief. Ze'era, the disgraced head of Israeli military intelligence, actually goes kind of on a public campaign, names the fellow in public years later. And by then, Ashraf Marwan he's a businessman in London, doing quite well money-wise. And suddenly, Marwan is killed or dies. He falls off a high-level balcony of his apartment in London. Almost for sure somebody had to push him, right? Just the way that balcony is built.
It was a staged murder.
So we don't know. The Israelis did it, the Egyptians, or other enemies he had. You're a Middle East arms dealer or whatever. What do you think?
I think the Egyptian intelligence killed him because Eli Ze'era did...
Because he named him.
He named it. It was a treason. I mean, we in the business as journalists know how it is important to protect our sources. It's even more important in the intelligence work to protect your sources. This is the most important task. You never reveal the identities of your sources.
By the way, even beyond that, beyond what journalists do, we write about the life of a spy handler, of a case officer. So a Mossad person, well, let's say, might set himself up in Paris. And from Paris, his or her job, usually him, his job would be to control agents from the base country in Paris agents in target countries, usually Arab countries, etc. So not only
Or
were you
Iran.
protecting their identity, or now Iran, of course, a major target, you not only were protecting their identity and sources, you become like their father, their mother, their aunt, their uncle, their supplier of
Babysitter.
extra money, favors, babysitting, cheer them up. Now, it's a very cynical game, and those of you who've watched some of those excellent series on TV, let's say The Americans on FX or whatever, can see that sometimes there are weird double games in how people are controlled. What I'm saying is I don't think an Israeli spy handler is always gentle with his agents. Probably sometimes he's sort of rough. He controls
no,
it.
they are gentle, but it's a manipulation.
A manipulation.
They manipulate weaknesses, whether it's greed, whether it's a psychological motive. Ashraf Marwan, for example, volunteered to be an Israeli agent.
Right.
Why? Because he wanted to take revenge on his in-laws, President Nasser, who treated him badly and didn't want him to marry his daughter.
Yeah.
So
It's soap operas, but once
yeah.
the Israeli intelligence finds that out, oh, there's a weak spot we can exploit.
yes.
Yeah, that's the way they do it, as you know.
But once you recruit him and cultivate him and work with him, you treat him like a king.
Now, I would
He's
thi-
the best asset you have.
I see. While he's being effective, okay, Jonathan Pollard. Even before the questions come from the index cards, let's talk about that for a couple of minutes. Jonathan Pollard was arrested in November of 1985. He had a high security job with a security clearance for the U.S. Naval Intelligence. He was spying for Israel. There too, as we write, and it wasn't the Mossad, it was a separate scientific liaison agency that the Israeli defense structure had. But a long time, Mossad and Shin Bet fellow that we write about a lot named Rafi Eitan, who we nicknamed Mr. Kidnap. Usually if he had a problem, including being part of the team that got the Nazi war criminal Adolf Eichmann in Argentina, a great success for Israeli intelligence and security. I mean, absolutely, just think what that did in 1960. Dramatized the Nazi crimes, put Israel on the map as an effective country in 1960. Anyway, Rafi Eitan was running Jonathan Pollard in the mid-'80s, but at first Pollard volunteered, and Eitan made sure to also give him gifts and money and trips to Paris and Venice, etc., to draw him in, and classically to have possible blackmail too. Let me just ask you this from an Israeli point of view, or what you know, is there sincere hope that Pollard may be released, maybe as part of a peace deal or some other way?
Well, let me state the following. I think it was totally wrong by the Israeli intelligence to recruit Jonathan Pollard, an American Jew who worked for the U.S. intelligence community, to recruit him as an agent.
Yeah. It put us American
Absolutely.
Jews in a bad situation.
Secondly, once he was arrested, Israel agreed to cooperate with the U.S. Investigation. However, Israel did not do the very basic, did not take the very basic step which any criminal lawyer would take to defend his client. If he is asked to cooperate with the police, he would attach strings. Let's have a deal. And Israel agreed to cooperate with the United States, and in that sense, without attaching any strings, maybe you would reduce his punishment. Without that, Israel, in a sense, betrayed Pollard. And now we're coming to the American equation of the story, the American intelligence side of that story.
Oh, I can tell you, there's the CIA and the FBI people keep telling the president, whether it's Obama or his predecessors, you can never release this guy. It'll send the wrong message.
But you know, Dan, it's wrong, because it's pure vengeance. Jonathan Pollard has been already 30 years in prison. There have been greater spies against America, and some of them were released earlier. So it's just the U.S. intelligence is speaking on Pollard. There is a sense of betrayal, obviously, by Pollard himself and by Israel. I can understand the American intelligence community feeling that Israel, one of our best friends, betrayed us, stabbed us in the back.
So it's a kind of revenge these years later. But return to your questions on the index card. Look at the first one here. Please comment on the recent Newsweek reports that Israel is still very active spying in and on the U.S. Well, let me just make a first remark, if I may. Almost every incident in the two Newsweek columns were pre-1985. We're pre-Pollard. And so first I want to say that that is a watershed event. That since Pollard was arrested in November of '85, Israel more explicitly said it won't spy in the US. Other things that are even mentioned in that article are, at least to me, the harmless, everyday bread and butter of going to technological conferences and picking up the brochures and giving a report back to your ministry in Israel, etc. Basically, I'm saying I don't think Israel would take the chance of having a spy in the US who might be caught, but the FBI, major sources for that Newsweek report, still feels it's going on.
Yes, I am pretty confident. I don't know everything. My knowledge is even very limited. But I would say that since the Pollard affair, Israel has not spied on American soil and neither on American soil nor against American targets abroad.
By the way, and I don't think we want to spend too many minutes on it, but again, in our book, we make a point of telling of some American espionage in Israel.
Oh, yes.
But your country expects that. They know that there's an antenna on the U.S. Embassy building pointing at them.
Oh, yes,
listening.
there is a very strong presence of SIG intelligence, signal intelligence, aerials and antennas, dishes which are supposed to pick up and bug conversations.
And you're not offended.
No, because it's in American territory.
What?
It's allowed. It's in American territory.
Oh, the embassy
the
building.
Roof. Yeah, the roof build. The building roof is, you can put there whatever you want.
A question
You can
from the,
sunbath or you can
Eavesdrop.
put some dishes.
You can do NSA work or sunbathe. Here, another one from the audience. Does the intelligence mandate change depending on who is prime minister? Or is it fully independent? And the guy has an example. The guy, whoever wrote this, I apologize. If Naftali Bennett becomes prime minister, would this change the approach of Israeli intel? Because he wants to keep the West Bank, etc. How independent are intelligence assessments and actions?
It would not change. Even if Naftali Bennett, God forbid, would be the prime minister, and he won't be, I can assure you.
Yes.
Well,
it won't be. I mean, you're saying it's quite independent, but they always obey the orders of the PM.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the Israeli intelligence community is independent. They encourage their people to have creative thinking, to come up with imaginary plans and operations. Of course, at the end of the day, they will obey the orders of the prime minister. But I don't think that, and we have witnessed it over the years. There have been changes in Israel.
Yeah.
Labour Party prime minister, Likud prime ministers, and the intelligence community remained very, very professional and independent.
But in the past few years, when they stand and give their own opinions, usually privately, but this tends to leak out with the Israeli press, on the Iran issue, whether to saber rattle or maybe attack Iran, Prime Minister Netanyahu and Ehud Barak, when he was the defense minister with Netanyahu, were almost planning an attack on Iran. But the Israeli chief of staff of the military and the heads of all the intel agencies said, don't do it.
Well, I'm not sure I think that Netanyahu and Barak were smart to bluff that they would be attacking Iran. It was a very smart move, which eventually probably convinced the international community to impose harsher sanctions, punitive measures against Iran. But as you mentioned, Dan, the heads of the security establishment and the intelligence community were against an Israeli air attack against Iran. Now, to a certain degree, those of you who have seen the good documentary, The Gatekeepers, six former heads of the Israeli domestic security service, the Shin Bet, are talking about their experience. And the impression they are giving that they are peaceniks, that they are in favor of a Palestinian state, they favor a peace agreement with Israel, and these are the people in the ground, those who on a daily basis confronted the Palestinians, in sometimes even ordered them to be interrogated and even tortured.
Assassinations,
And even
torture,
assassinations, yes.
And now they're peaceniks. I thought maybe some Americans who saw the gatekeepers might have been a bit misled. But in part because the Shin Bet leaders were saying, if only the prime ministers had listened to us and taken advantage of what we gave them. On a silver platter, we would kill the number 2 man in the PLO. We'd kill the head of some other Palestinian radical organization. And we'd give it to the PM as, look, now you can somehow make peace? No. I mean, that tended to cause another round of violence. I didn't agree with their conclusion that they were presenting a great situation on a platter.
No, my criticism of what they said in the documentary was, hey guys, where have you been? Now you are peaceniks, but when you had the opportunity, when you were heading the security agencies, why did not you implement the policy that only after leaving the office you recommended?
Yeah.
So what
they were all tough guys when they were in office.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Drones. Now, we also write a lot in our book about Israel's technological advantages. And, you know, it's kind of funny because in our book, Every Spy a Prince, unbelievably 24 years ago, we were like 14-year-olds, right? And in that book, we really emphasize the human factor, that what's special about Israel and Israeli intelligence is people had come from all over the world and there were language skills, that Israelis were innovative, they wouldn't take no for an answer, they'd find another way of getting things done if the first route didn't work somehow. Now, when we looked at it again now for Spies Against Armageddon, we still found the human factor is important, very important. And heads of the Mossad, you know, told us that's the big thing. But I feel it's really, really augmented by Israel's technological lead, way ahead of all the neighboring states.
Oh yes, Israel has state-of-the-art technological achievements. The Israeli equivalent of NSA here, Unit 8200, which belongs to the military intelligence, is well advanced.
They can listen in on a lot of things in the Middle East.
But they don't have the same capabilities as the NSA,
Not so
as it been revealed by Edward Snowden. And by the way,
what wasn't?
And by the way, Snowden also revealed that there is an official agreement, cooperation agreement between the NSA and Unit 8200 to exchange information.
Which, you know, against terrorists, hooray. A question from the audience, can drones make a big difference in the Middle East? In fact, the questioner wonders, could they pinpoint the enemy leaders and avoid big military operations? Are we getting into that era where we don't need large brigades moving? And keep in mind that Israel's army has an amazing, you know, kind of a SEAL Team 6, the Sayeret Matkal, and they come up often in our book too, of getting even to the Syrian nuclear reactor before it was bombed by the Israeli Air Force to get samples, etc., from the Syrian desert. So what do you think? I think there are still missions where you need to send people.
Absolutely. By the way, Israel was a pioneer in developing drones already in the early 70s. But drones and all the technological gadgets which you have in your disposal would not make obsolete the need to have agents in the field, to have someone close to the leader of a country, which is in order to understand whether he's going to war or not. So intelligence would continue to rely on human sources, and if an intelligence community doesn't do it, it would fail. The technology is not a solution. It helps. It saves lives.
How about it's a force multiplier too? It gives you more eyes and ears and
yes,
miles.
Yes. It plays into your advantage, but still you need the ears and the eyes near those who make the decisions.
Yeah, smart analysts, linguists, etc. Analysts, very important. Question from the audience. Comment about the assassination of the Hamas official in Abu Dhabi. Actually, it was Dubai, by the way. And it features on the cover of our book where there are pictures of these men and women, and people have said, who are they? Were they models? You know, Dan and Yossi, did you find like 8 models to be the Israeli spies? No. They are part of the large Mossad team that went to Dubai to carry out an assassination at the beginning of 2010, 4 years ago, and none of them was caught. None was captured, but the Dubai police officials and the little booth at the airport, had photos of them from security cameras. And also it seems that it's one of those countries that when you arrive, they put your passport face down on a scanner for a second. And so they would also have your passport photo from having entered the country. Some of those seem to be passport photos.
The Mossad agents were caught on cameras at the airport, at the shopping center, at the hotel,
so
everywhere.
let me put it this way. I'd flesh this out more. A faction of the Mossad, certainly around the head of the agency at the time, Meir Dagan, said basically, mission accomplished, right? The terrorist chief, who apparently was involved in acquiring arms, money, etc. from Iran, so Hamas and Iran would get together, other things that Mr. Mabhouh may have been doing. Mission accomplished. He's wiped out. Really a mystery, even what was the drug that did it, how could it possibly be done in a locked hotel room, all that. All the Israelis got away, but true, there were photos. And there was someone else, very high up in Israeli security, who said, this is a fiasco. You can't have all these people photographed and then some records of where they got their passports and where the credit cards come from. This is terrible. Now, what do you think on balance? I think in the modern world, there are going to be security cameras, there are going to be credit card records more than ever, and the Mossad has to live with that.
And, well, yes, all the intelligence communities in the world, the biometric system which is put in place would and is already making life very difficult for the intelligence community.
To forge a passport or use a fake one.
Yeah, to forge your identity, to forge documents. But on the other hand, I'm sure that the toy departments of the intelligence communities would find a solution to with the technology how to bypass that problem.
To Yossi, someone writes, you stated that Iran is essentially at the point of being nuclear capable, but Israel can live with it. That's what the audience member felt he was hearing. But how? Iran getting nukes would spark a nuclear arms race, and Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Turkey would try to get nukes. U.S. officials are very concerned about that. And also Iran would be emboldened, very good, throughout the region and blackmail everybody, etc., and have a nuclear umbrella. So how could Israel live with that?
It's a very good question and a very good point. Iran is capable to assemble a bomb within a matter of a few months or a year. Probably they would not do it. At least many analysts believe that they would gain nothing from assembling a bomb. They could only lose from assembling a bomb, and it would be sufficient for them to rest on their laurels of having the capability, being on the threshold.
And they'd have this blackmail power that
no
person writes about?
But on the other hand, there is a growing fear in the region and outside the region that once Iran would have the bomb, then other countries in the region, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, would also rush to have nuclear bombs. And the accelerated nuclear race could spread beyond the Middle East. Countries like Brazil and Argentina, which have the capabilities to produce nuclear weapons, would say, just a moment, if they have nuclear weapons, sure, why not we?
Well, no wonder it's such a high priority to stop Iran.
It is.
But you're afraid that the world can't, and that Iran will, with an agreement, get to state threshold.
I want to ask you, what do you think, what is your impression of the Obama administration? Would they stop Iran?
Oh, I really meant it. If Iran would make the move to put together a bomb, to assemble the bomb and put it on a missile, etc., and have a strike force, then yes, and don't forget, and boy, a lot of people in Israeli intelligence told us this, the U.S., for many reasons, including size, where the weapon systems are, where our ships are, where our submarines are, our capability to even fly incredible B-2 bomber missions out of the U.S. and hit the region, the U.S. has so much more firepower, and therefore a lot more capability to react close to that deadline moment. right? So convincing intelligence comes that Iran 2 weeks from now may turn the screw. In a moment almost from Jack Bauer on 24, we know what moment it'll happen. Life is not really that neat, of course, but still, the intel report may give you more or less a date. Well, the Americans will feel that the US military will feel that it could react huge in a day. And Israel doesn't have that capability. It's much smaller. And so for various reasons, the Israelis say, you know, we need to decide sooner. We can't let Iran get so close to it. If Iran puts its nuclear weapons program deeper and deeper in the ground, then Israel doesn't have as many bunker buster weapons, not nearly as many, and not the best ones. So the U.S. can do more, and Israel can't. Can Israel depend on the U.S., whether it's Obama or his successor? In case you haven't noticed, there's going to be a different president in 2017, and we don't know what sort of man or woman. And Israel has to kind of make plans based on that. The U.S. is the main ally, but who's going to be the leader? What are the chances? And will that person really stand with us or take care of the problem? It's a hugely difficult thing, hugely, for Israel to think about. Longer than that, just a big sort of optimist, pessimist outlook. Because I know there are people in Israeli intelligence who write about, earlier I tried to speak to you about Israel's place in the region, you know, but beyond that, you know, the capability of Israel to be strong, to have a growing economy, etc. Do you find in your country it's now a mix of optimists and pessimists on the one hand, on the other hand? I mean, these are very dramatic issues, and we don't feel that Israel's size or strength is guaranteed. We don't know what it'll be.
Well, yes, Israelis are many depressed.
Many are depressed.
Yes, because they move from one polar to another. One day it's a festival, it's a celebration, it's a victory. On the other day is the feeling that this is the end of the world.
It's a bipolar life.
Yes, yes, very much so. Therefore, you have this you know, move from optimism to pessimism. I am very optimistic about the future of Israel, but I don't think that Israel is really under ongoing existential threat day after day. Israel is strong, has the most flourishing economy in the region, has the biggest and the strongest army. We didn't talk about it, but Israel is retaining its nuclear monopoly in the region. Israel does have nuclear bombs, although Israel has never admitted that they do have it. It's called ambiguous policy. We neither confirm nor deny it.
Of course, in our book, we have a history of how Israel put together a nuclear program.
In that sense, I'm very optimistic. On the other hand, I believe that if there is any real threat to the very fabric existence of the Israeli of Israel, it is the Palestinian problem. We have to solve it. We have to have peace with the Palestinians, or some sort of a live and let live agreement. And above all, if it is not solved, then the internal problems which Israel is facing, the divisions within the Israeli society, the gaps between those who have and those who don't have, so the socioeconomic problems would have effect on Israel.
Well, doesn't that leave you wanting more? We'll give Yossi the last word because he came from, you know, all the way from Israel. I just came up from Washington, D.C. It's a delight to meet you. Very nice audience. You heard you'll have a chance to meet us in the hallway, apparently. Signing books, purchases are optional, but it'll be nice to meet you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.